I've been searching for the best natural sounding vocal tuning software for years, and it really comes down to two main things I'm looking for. The first is that it sounds natural. There's no obvious artifacting, and it doesn't obviously sound tuned. It sounds natural. Right. Second is that it has powerful tools that are easy to use and allow me to address really any issues that I've come up against. And every software that I've used up till recently has had some pros and some cons. It's maybe really easy to use and has the tools I need, but there's a little bit of artifacting that just makes it sound a little processed. Or maybe it sounds really great, but the tools are a little bit frustrating to use. But recently I discovered RePitch Standard by SynchroArts, and it's awesome. It's definitely my new favorite vocal tuning software. It has two features that I've never seen anywhere else that really allow me to address even the weirdest issues when you're tuning vocals, and it sounds completely natural. I would never know that these vocals are tuned, which is exactly what I'm looking for. Now up top, I just want to say this video is not sponsored by SynchroArts. These are completely my own thoughts, but it is sponsored by Sweetwater. And if you decide to pick up RePitch or a bundle of it with VocalLine, which I highly recommend, if you go through my Sweetwater link, it won't cost you any more, but a small amount will come back to support me in this channel, and you get access to their full support. So if you have any issues in the future, you can always reach out to Sweetwater, which is a really, really handy feature, especially as computers update and all that nonsense. And lastly, before we get into it, if you're struggling to get a great vocal sound, tuning is a piece of that, but you also need to mix the vocals, and I want to give you something for free to help with that. It's my Pro Vocal Checklist. It just goes through the 6 steps that I always do when I'm mixing vocals. You can download it for free from the link in the description below. But let's go and jump into Logic and take a look at this plugin. Now, the plugin we're looking at today is called RePitch by SynchroArts, and you'll find it if you're new to this in Logic under Audio Units. Just look for SynchroArts once you've downloaded it, and we want the ARA version. Now, there's a little bit of a trick with the ARA version as Apple is shifting some stuff around. It's an Apple issue that will get resolved. But basically, to use the ARA version, you have to be in Rosetta mode. To do this, you have to find Logic in your applications and right-click on it and hit Get Info, and then be sure that Open using Rosetta is selected. But now that we're in Rosetta mode, having an ARA plugin means that it can pull the audio into the plugin without us having to process it. So historically, with something like Melodyne or earlier versions of RePitch, you would have to transfer all the audio into the plugin, so you'd have to let it play in real time. With this, all I have to do to get it into the plugin is pull it up in ARA with Rosetta mode on currently, and that will be resolved in the future, and hit play. And it is immediately all in the plugin, and I can see my entire vocal performance for the entire song in the song immediately. It's kind of like Flex Pitch in Logic if you use that, but in a third-party plugin, which is really handy. This is a graphical vocal tuning plugin, meaning that we see the vocal totally broken out across the piano roll, and we can see exactly what note was sung and if they're a little bit flat or a little bit sharp at any point in the song. And we'll just go through the main features of this as a plugin, but at the end I'll go through the two that I think make this a particularly unique vocal tuning plugin that allows you to get even more natural sounding vocal performances much quicker. It's super easy to do with this plugin. So first and foremost, the most important piece of getting good vocal tuning is a great vocal performance to start that's almost perfectly in tune anyway. So if we listen to this in solo,
I won't say tomorrow I'll be gone.
it's almost perfectly in tune. There's just a couple little areas where she's a little bit off. And what's cool about this style of vocal tuning is I can go in here and just move individual notes around. So here she's just a little bit flat. I could grab that note and just shift it up just a little bit. And then we can listen to it.
Won't say
So that say, just a little bit flat. So I could pull it down if she was a little bit sharp.
won't say tomorrow.
Or pull it up if she was a little bit flat.
I won't say tomorrow I'll be gone.
Pretty sure she meant to be on that E. So I can put it perfectly on that E there. And you can just drag and shift it around. You can see where it says 0 cents. That means it's perfectly on. It's not above or below any amount of cents, which is a relative note range from 0 to 100. And so she's perfectly on that note now, and we can just listen to that.
I won't say tomorrow I'll be gone.
Now there, she gets a little bit flat, and then she overcorrects and gets a little bit sharp at the end. We'll look at a cool way that we can adjust that in just a second, but let's just take a second to go through the features of this plugin. The main fundamental features we have in 4 little nodes around each note. So the bottom left is drift, so we can correct it where it will either, if it's drifting up sharp or drifting down flat, you can have it correct so it's more centered. I don't want to actually do that on this vocal, so I'll undo that. And then the center is just the volume change, so I can make it louder or quieter by 10 decibels. Again, I don't need to do that on this, but it can be helpful if you have just one little word or one little area that's just a little too loud. If you're already working on your vocal in this area anyway, why not go ahead and get that volume adjustment set anyway, since you're already going through the entire vocal performance. I don't do a lot of that, but it can be helpful if there's ever something that needs to be just smoothed out a little bit. Then our third note here is correction. So this is just percent correction. So how close are you to the original note? So at 0% correction, this is what was sung originally. And as I pull it up to 100, it's to the nearest note that it thinks it should be on. And so for us, it's at E. And then on the top, we have basically a vibrato control. So we can extend the vibrato and make it more extreme, or really flatten it out and give a bit of a more tuned effect. So you'll notice there, it sounds a little bit tuned. And if we undo that one and we select all of our notes and we put all of them to a totally flat, it's going to start to sound really auto-tuning.
I won't say tomorrow will be gone.
But it's kind of cool at the same time. As tuned as that is, it somehow still sounds a little bit natural. It's not a full auto-tune effect. So there's a lot of songs that I could see actually having this perfect no vibrato feel for, and it worked just fine in a song and not even necessarily be obvious auto-tune, but
I
be
won't say tomorrow
perfectly on pitch.
will be gone.
But in this case, this is a kind of blues rock song. If we listen to it in the context of the full song, let me undo that hard tuning there. We want this vocal to feel natural. And this is where the additional features are really, really handy. Now, the first one is a draw tool. This one allows us, like here, where she gets just a little bit flat and then a little bit sharp, as opposed to spinning forever trying to finesse that or adjusting, you know, how much of the vibrato she has. I can just go in and hit D on the keyboard or click on this little pencil icon up here and literally just draw in that I want, whatever I want this curve to be. So I could have her get a little bit flat and then end up on the note so it's still kind of natural sounding, and we can listen to that. I would never know that that was tuned, and it gets that perfect note in, so she doesn't drop a little flat and then get a little bit sharp. She just stays perfectly on that note, but it doesn't sound tuned to my ears, and I can do it for just that little section right now. So the draw tool, awesome. I am using this all over the place. If it just spikes up and I notice it getting a little bit sharp for a moment, I don't want it to, I can just go in with the draw tool and just draw it, make it perfectly flat. And I've yet to come across a situation where I notice it becoming obviously tuned, which is the key here. The second one that they have is a good example of this, is a little bit later in the same vocal. So at the end of this vocal right here, she has a kind of extreme vibrato, and it just feels a little bit pitchy. It gets a little bit sharp and then it corrects again to be a little bit flat. This is very common. She's an excellent singer. I'm not giving her a harsh time here. It's just kind of the way that singing goes. You tend to go in one direction a little bit too much and then overcorrect just a little bit. Very, very common. What I want to do is basically just try to bring this where it's smoothed out. Now, the most common way I'll do this is by splitting these. So in this, you can just go to the little split tool or hit S on the keyboard and split it right there. And then go back to your main selector tool and put these all on so they're all on the main note. And then here, if I wanted to, I could actually join these, select them and hit J on the keyboard, and it joins them together. And that's good, but you can still see it still has this remnant of she did a little bit too big of a vibrato and then kind of swelled it back a little bit. So now I want to try to get it just a little bit more contained. And that's where the last tool that I think is so unique to this plugin and really, really great is this shaper tool right here. You can hit V on the keyboard or just click right there. And it allows you to put in these points at the peaks of the vibrato. And then I can literally make this whatever I want it to be. So in this case, I want it to feel extremely natural, just be a less extreme vibrato. And I can pull it down and shape it exactly the way I want it to be. I can add a final point here, pull that so it ends. And we could even combine this, use the draw tool to draw in so it lands right at the center of the note. And now, if we listen to it, you would never know that that's tuned, but it's perfectly tuned. The vibrato is still there, still feels very natural, but I'm able to contain it so it stays closer to that center note, never gets too sharp, never gets too flat. And this is a problem I've come into with every other vocal tuning software, where basically, if we go back to how it was before, if we only have the option of some version of this, where I can make the vibrato less, then at times, like here, that is very little vibrato. It doesn't feel very natural. Compared to being able to really customize it and be exactly what I want it to be, that's really, really powerful. Now, you can get RePitch in two versions. There's Elements, and then there's Standard. You need Standard to have access to these last two tools. I really think it's worth it. And then another way that you can get it is actually bundled with VocalLine, where it can automatically tune any additional vocals that you have, and that is really worth it, and on a huge Black Friday sale right now. So I'll link to that down below at Sweetwater. Definitely check that out if you think that would be helpful. I love this plugin. I love VocalLine. Next week, we're going to go in depth into VocalLine and how instead of tuning 8 vocals, like I would have to manually tune and align 8 vocals, I can tune 1 and VocalLine will tune and align all of the other backing vocals, so everything's perfectly aligned and perfectly tuned to each other, so they all sound great together. Very cool. Definitely check that out next week. And again, you can get RePitch and VocalLine together on sale right now. Sweetwater down link below. It won't cost you any extra, and a small part will come back and support me. Now, before you go, be sure to grab that Pro Vocal checklist from the link in the description below. It just goes through the 6 steps I always do when mixing vocals. It's completely free, and it's really going to help you out. I'd also love to hear from you. Do you have a favorite vocal tuning plugin? Is it RePitch? Is it something else? Definitely let me know in the comments below. If this video is helpful, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next week with another video.